It appears that President Trump has personally intervened in order to cut money for the poor in Puerto Rico. So now this is according to government sources who helped work on this budget deal. And this was actually had some bipartisan elements to it until Donald Trump got himself involved. So now, according to Politico, the budget deal unveiled by lawmakers this week allocates up to about $5.7 billion in Medicaid funds for Puerto Rico over the next 2 years. Now, what's different is that earlier, both parties had agreed to give Puerto Rico $12 billion over 4 years. So it's slightly less amount of money. The real problem here is the length that they're able to get that money. Now, for one, the problem here is short-term measure, right? It ends 2 years instead of 4 years, setting up another deal, setting up another fight. That means the nearly 1.4 million people receiving Medicaid on the island face some uncertainty when it comes to their health care and might not get funding renewed over the next 2 years. And there was a slight cut in how much money the island had received as well. And so the question here is why? Why is that? Well, I think we know why. And so I don't think Trump likes Puerto Rico all that much. I think he doesn't consider them Americans. And look, following the devastating hurricanes, as we've seen, the Trump administration dropped the ball immensely when it came to helping people on the island, when it came to actually funding relief efforts on the island. The administration did a terrible job. And of course, they had to blame it on it's because it's an island surrounded by water, big water, ocean water. No, dude, you should have that stuff ready. But again, the administration, to be fair, has been cutting. Not to be fair, but to be honest, they have been cutting disaster relief for quite some time. And not just, under Trump, but Republicans in general, they hate disaster relief funding. Unless, of course, it goes to their state, then they love it. But when it goes to someone else, and especially when it goes to a territory and not a state full of Latinos, of course, well, then they're totally against, this funding. And so, look, here's the thing. Trump has refused essentially to do anything more than the bare minimum in order to help the island. Instead, look, you saw, he called them lazy and ungrateful for whatever help. So, look, and he sparred with a lot of politicians. Carmen Yulin Cruz, for example. He had a lot of not so great things to say about her. And of course, she fired back. So there's nothing more that Trump hates more than uppity Latinos, especially women. And so, look, this is not only a shot at some of the politicians that he doesn't like on the island, but it's also a shot at the poor that are living there as well. Again, I think he hates the poor, but I also think he hates Latinos more. And when you combine the two, poor Latino, well, it's even worse. It's double the reason for him to personally intervene in order to cut funding. And so we'll get to that. So let me give you more context, right? Puerto Rico's Medicaid program had been relying on a series of short-term funding extensions since the fall, after confronting a fiscal cliff on September 30th, when the temporary boost in money, one of several that Congress has enacted in recent years, was set to expire. Now, Puerto Rico has had a lot of financial difficulties, a lot of which are thanks to our banks and our banking system. But there is also problems with a little bit of corruption in the government and exploitation. And so, as well as storms. Now, let's go back to the corruption for a second here. There are issues with that. In fact, federal authorities earlier this year arrested a former top Puerto Rico health official and other territory leaders as part of a corruption probe. Now, the Trump administration is going to use that as part of their argument, saying, well, they don't need that much money. Because look at all the corruption, look at all the waste that's going on here. They didn't actually need that money. Well, wait a minute. You're endangering 1.4 million people who are very poor that need that medical help, that funding. They need the Medicaid program. They don't care. And look, I have no problem with going after corrupt officials. We should actually go after corrupt officials, which is why should go after Trump. Now, originally, Republicans and Democrats had both agreed to the $12 billion in Medicaid funds. But Donald Trump, he saw that, and according to sources, he balked at it and said, that's too much money. I can't believe we're giving Puerto Rico so much money. Oh, we can't do that. Those Latinos, they're just lazy anyway. That's why they're poor. They don't actually need that money. Look at all the corruption. Yikes. So now, in fact, the spokesperson for the White House Office of Management and Budget, the OMB, said this. This administration remains committed to properly prioritizing U.S. taxpayer dollars. With the historical waste we have faced in Puerto Rico, additional funding was not needed or fiscally responsible. Now, let me just say, first, they're saying that, look, we're trying to save taxpayers' money. There's so much waste going on and corruption in Puerto Rico, so we can't really do anything, other than limit their funding because they obviously don't need it. Now, this is the same administration that created a Space Force that was unnecessary. We already had U.S. Space Command. Why do we need a separate Space Force? That doesn't make any sense. It doesn't make any sense. Not only that, but the administration asked for, additional money for the military. Now, the Democrats, in their amazing wisdom and their resistance, actually gave Trump even more money for the military, for the Pentagon, than he even asked for. Now they have a total of about $738 billion in Pentagon funding. And now they also, to add on to it, got $1.8 trillion in tax cuts for the rich. And the Trump administration has robbed disaster relief in order to build a boondoggle vanity project on the border. Guys are sure looking out for the taxpayer, man. By the way, Trump spent over $100 million in taxpayer money golfing at his own resorts. Just saying. Not only that, but many former Trump cabinet members had resigned after being exposed as wasting taxpayer money on themselves. Let me give you an example of one that's still here. Ben Carson. Ben Carson spent $31,000 of taxpayer money on a dining set. The best people. The greatest people. Oh, but it's the Puerto Ricans that are corrupt. Oh, come on, man. Look in the mirror. Look in the mirror. Trump wouldn't do this to Texas, Oklahoma, or Alabama, by the way. No, he'd only do this, try to cut their funding for a territory filled with Latinos and people who have criticized him for his terrible response after being devastated by these storms. I mean, Puerto Rico's got a lot of issues here, and this administration doesn't at all care about them, and in fact is doing everything they can to make it worse. Hey guys, hopefully you enjoyed that free video. Now I'm going to have to ask you a favor. Between the demonetization and the YouTube algorithm messing around with view counts, etc., we're having a hard time adjusting to the new YouTube reality, which is where you guys come in. See, we have a Patreon, patreon.com/TYTNation, set up to help us rely on you guys, the viewers, instead of big corporate ads. Look, you know the show. You know how I'm not in favor of big corporations anyway. So help us transition away from relying on the ad model to pay the bills and sign up to be a patron, patreon.com/TYTNation. That goes a long way to help us keep the lights on. And you guys will know that you're supporting independent, progressive media.